Welcome to the Layman's Lab. Today we are very excited to introduce Tom Quigley. He is the co-owner of Chill Coffee down in Del Rico, which is my favorite coffee spot. If you've never been there, you need to go check it out. But really the thing that I really want to get Tom in on is his expertise with The Wise Warrior, the Dare books. You've published quite a few books. Tell us about your books, but more importantly, tell us about how you got there.
Yeah, so my books I started writing as a way for integration for myself. So I was a business consultant for the last 10 years. I ran a major telecom company for 20 years, and I got involved in the plant medicine space in 2014. In 2017, I wrote my first book, which was Corporate to Cannabis. And that really outlined how I took what I knew from running a telecom business and saw that corporate cannabis was on its way and that executives were going to be needed in the space. And then from there, I started working as a consultant, working with startups, a lot of startups, helping them to get up and launched in the cannabis space. We ran a few organizations here in Florida that did education, and I worked out of an incubator in Colorado called Canopy Boulder.
Okay.
And they helped startups through a 12 to 16 week program get ready to either launch a product, get on stage and pitch and raise capital from investors, and then move on from there. And after doing that, then I started working private with clients one-on-one. And so I worked very closely with them for a number of years. And then my wife, she's like, you're helping all these other entrepreneurs, why don't you help me? And she wanted us to get something started. So we started Chill Coffee almost 5 years ago now.
Okay.
And we've been in the Valrico market. We've lived here. I've lived here since '92. And we saw that there was a need for people to come together, and it's a botanical type social. So I combined everything that I was doing over the years, and during that time, I was having a lot of back injuries, so I started writing. And that's where the writing of my books began. And I went back to, because a lot of the startups or the individuals that I was meeting with and helping, they had great ideas, they had great concepts, but they had no plan to move the ball forward. So that's where the first book came, Don't Be Stuck at Startup. And that was basically to help people get launched, get their business launched, get up and running. And then I wrote a number of other books, all while my mom was in the hospital.
Okay.
So it was about 3 years ago. And probably, so since 2017 and now I've written approximately 12 different books, including a children's book on Santa.
That's amazing. And what drove you? So give us a bit of history of your background, right? So where were you born? Where did you grow up? What led you to this path, right? Because you're kind of the hub for everybody who's looking for help. You know, every time I go to Chill Coffee, there's ex-vets in there. There's guys who are doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There's a very wide, diverse group of people that seem to fluctuate towards your location. Now, obviously, you've got quite a deep history of how you pull these people together. Give us some insight of where you come from.
How long do you have?
We have lots of time.
So if you want to go back to, where I grew up in South Florida, Fort Lauderdale. I grew up during the 80s. I grew up in an Italian Catholic family. I wasn't always the model citizen for a number of time, but I was an athlete. And I was going to be the first in my family not to go into the military. Okay. Long history of military family, my dad, my grandfather. And I was going to go to college. And I had a scholarship lined up to go to UM from Piper High School for wrestling. And I wound up breaking my jaw my senior year. Oh. So my plan was to go to UM. I wound up not going there. I went to Nova University, which was another school, and I went in for law.
Okay.
And because I had a lot of legal troubles in my final few years, so I had a lot of dealings, unfortunately. in the legal landscape. And then also with my injury, I had a lawsuit, so I was seeing lawyers. So my whole family was like, you're a great arguer. Nobody can win with you. You should be a lawyer. I learned I didn't like to read.
Okay.
So I went after the first year of law school, then I changed my major to psychology. And I took addiction specialty. And, my dad had trouble with alcohol when I was a child or when I was a kid. And he went through a rehab program and he was in AA for a number of years. And so me and my mom actually took some of those classes at Nova. And then I decided I wanted to get a communications degree and went to that end of it and wound up graduating with a psychology degree.
Okay.
And that spawned my first business. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. I was running hustles, I guess you would say, selling sports tickets where you bet it's like what a parlay card would be in high school. So my first business, I wanted to be a sports broadcaster, and that's what I was going to school for. And I got tied up with these guys out of Las Vegas, and my first business was a tout service. So a tout service is where you pick in 900 numbers. So we did 900 numbers. We would do all the picks for gamblers. If you were betting on football for the weekend, you could call in, see the scores, and then for $10 you get who to bet on. And so that was my first legitimate business.
Interesting.
And that put me on the path to entrepreneurship as opposed to a psychologist with an addiction degree. It was like $8 an hour back then, and I was going to have to go to school for 4 more years.
Yes.
So I went as an entrepreneur, and I did that. I ran that.
Did you finish school?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I finished school. I finished with my psychology degree.
As a lifelong entrepreneur, how do you feel about college these days? Do you think it's worth your time?
I think it gives you good structure in some of it, but I think everything you're going to learn in what you're doing. So whether it's skill specific or along the lines of, if you have the knowledge and the know-how, what college was designed for me was just to get me in that structure. But I don't think now that it's, unless you have something specialized, like you're going to be a lawyer or you want to be a CPA. My son graduated with an accounting degree, and he's making good use of that now.
I think accountants, CPAs, lawyers, doctors. I think those are some professions that it's necessary. But if you're going to go into business, I think it's a waste of time and money. Personal opinion.
Yeah.
This is a guy who's got a master's degree and probably $100,000 worth of student loan debt to show for it. Previously, it paid off, but.
Yeah, and I remember the day I wrote that last check for my college too, and it wasn't too long ago. It might have been like 20 years ago now, but it was an expensive 5 years.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But you definitely have the one thing I realize with the way that you're telling your story is you seem to have the same problem most entrepreneurs have is. You don't really know what you want to do, right? You want to do everything and you'll try everything, but you're not exactly sure about what's going to be the successful path. So, you go into law, you start obviously in high school, you want to go, you have a particular path as an athlete, very similar to Kevin's story. He was he got injured in doing college ball, right? So, then all of a sudden you have to pivot, and now what's the next thing? And I always find it interesting, entrepreneurs, is you never really kind of stick with one game, and then every game that you try teaches you another thing about how to do the next one. And then sometimes it takes 10 years, sometimes it takes 5 years, but eventually you realize that you've just developed this really deep skill set that allows you then eventually to go hit that business and go, okay, now I can make a success of it.
Yeah, and I think that comes from the way I was raised, and like everything was a hustle. I'm a blue collar worker. I lived in South Florida where things were extravagant. You wanted to be able to go out and have money, and everything was flashy and more. So that builds that into you. So for survival, you choose things like shady sales jobs. I've done those, and these different things, but you pick up skills as you're going through it. And really, as an entrepreneur, you're chasing money.
Yes.
And then, I learned through a great awakening of my own that it wasn't all about the money, and that was in 2013. So I wound up, after all that, I probably had 8 or 9 different businesses, but I built a very successful telecom company. We made prepaid calling cards. Okay. So I went to MCI, they were right here in Tampa, and proposed these international cards to allow people to call Mexico from Florida, from all these towns. It wound up taking off. We wound up building that. I did that as a 20-year career. We did over $30 million a year. And I learned a lot about branding, building, sales. I used my psychology that I did learn in college to help me to be a better salesperson. But I still was always chasing. You know, and then I got misdiagnosed with a mass on my pancreas in 2013.
Okay, so this is the mass awakening.
Okay. So, well, 2010 I got sober. So I was in a car accident. I got prescribed Xanax after having an anxiety and panic attack because my business was going through some issues and problems at the time. And I hit a tree doing 40 on Lithia Pinecrest Road, and I was airlifted to the hospital. And after that, I got addicted to pain pills. So I was taking about 20 pills a day. Still running a very successful company, running my business, but medicating for about 3 years until 2010. And I was 295 pounds, stage 3 liver disease, type 2 diabetes. And I was hospitalized, and it was the first Christmas after my divorce that I had kids. And I was like, I'll do anything if I could just get better. And I quit cold turkey after that. And that's when I got into mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu. And that was in 2010, 2011. And, you know, I told you this before, but, you know, I always considered myself as I got sober then. You know, because I quit drinking alcohol and I quit taking pills, and I've been sober since 2010. But I had another great awakening after an ayahuasca journey. And I realized I was never really sober. I just transferred, you know, my distraction from myself and from what I was going through with another thing, which became the gym, became jiu-jitsu. Then it became businesses, and then it became... So I've come through this huge awareness of where all this has come to bring me to where I am today. But it wasn't easy.
Let's unpack that a little bit. So as a veteran who's been through my mess of shit, and Jay knows a lot about my mess, but you talk about the Great Awakening, you know, that moment in life where you're like, holy shit, like this is not how it's supposed to go. You know, for me, that was probably 2 years ago. But like, what? I'm wildly interested about, like, you just decided one day that, like, hey, I'm going sober. Like, I'm done with this. Like, did you get help from a program? Like, what? Tell us about that part.
So, you know, I got out of the hospital Christmas Eve, went to the store, bought all the gifts for my kids, had Christmas with my kids, and decided right then that I was going to quit. I took a couple weeks. I went back in for the biopsy. They told me that it was borderline stage 4 liver disease, so I would need a liver transplant. And I went to the store, Chuck's Whole Foods, and I bought magnesium. I bought all kinds of vitamins, and I sweated it out for 3 days until I got off the pills.
Nice shit.
And then I stopped alcohol. I had tried AA in the past. Like, it just it wasn't. Didn't work. Like I had a DUI in 06 too, and I got a DUI for hitting that tree on Xanax. But which those were, you know, awakenings in one aspect, but they didn't slow me down. Those things didn't slow me down. It was the thought of, you know, not being able to see my kids.
There you go.
You know,
so I have a college roommate and another guy that I played ball with that he just took his own life. The other roommate was addicted to pain pills after some major stuff going on. I feel like, and this is that's something I'm really passionate about. Like, we have a guy that just joined us in the gym recently that, like, because of joining us, like, he did some blood work. You know, he's what is he, like, maybe 40 something, we'll call it that. And he's having that moment of like, oh shit, I gotta change, I gotta do something, you know. And I hate when I hear the tragic endings, you know, and like we go through all this stuff, and it's just like the guy that joined us, like one of the things I've said to him through all this, I'm like, dude, he's like really hard on himself right now about it. And I was like, bro, you caught it. Like, you woke up. Because there's a lot of dudes that don't wake up. And their story ends bad. And your story has a chance to end well, you know?
And it's interesting because we can become aware and we can recognize all these things. But, you know, I think being a go-getter and an entrepreneur is what really attributed to me being able to go forward. Because a lot of times you just don't know what to do.
Yeah,
100%.
You know, and so you can become aware of this, and you know it. And you know it has to change, but you don't know the steps to do to integrate this into your life.
Yeah.
But we talk about this too, like manifesting your reality. Okay. And to me, like the guy that's been involved with us, like here's a guy that had a tough situation that caused him, I don't want to share too many details out of respect for his privacy, but it had a tough situation that led to him reaching out to me that created this snowball of effects that has now put the right people in his life to help him progress and continue the right path. And to your point, like, he's not an entrepreneur, but to your point, like the drive to want to be better, you know, and that, I think that's a trait of most entrepreneurs, is just improving my business, improving my life, improving my skills. We did this because we want something better for our family. But then you pursue it, and then when you're seeking, like, what can I do to be better? The right people fall into your lap.
Yeah.
Jay's one of those for me.
But you have to be open, and sometimes with strong leaders, strong entrepreneurs, we're really good at faking stuff.
That's true.
So nobody knows what's really going on.
Yeah.
So, you know, during all that time where you're looking successful to everybody around you and everybody, you're crumbling inside, and you don't even know how to ask for help.
That's right.
You know, and that becomes a cycle. And
So a lot of times your own family doesn't realize that.
Yeah, they don't. And you may try something and it doesn't work, and you're afraid to try something again.
Yeah.
And you're afraid to take those steps. So, you know, really what I'm doing nowadays with the Wise Warrior program is taking all those things that have gotten me to where I am right now. And then I went through 30 years of on and off therapy, diagnosed with bipolar disorder, on every type of medication there was. I've been Baker acted. I've gone through all those things, but I've made millions of dollars. I've lost millions of dollars. But nothing was enough.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that when faced with my own mortality, and, you know, I'm a big Tony Robbins fan, you know, I did Tony Robbins when I was 22, but there's an exercise where he says, what do you want to be remembered for at your funeral? You know, and I had really thought about those things. And so 2010, that happened. And then 2013, I got misdiagnosed with a mass on my pancreas. So now I got clean, and I was doing, and they told me I had pancreatic cancer. And that turned out that it wasn't cancer, but it took me 4 months to find out. At the time I was running my business. I thought everything was great. And that's when I shifted my whole thing from, it's not about chasing all the money. And that was a big shift. I kind of peeled back like an onion over the years. It didn't really all come at once, because I feel I was so far, so deep in that pursuit of more at any cost. You know, that it took a number of times, and, you know, over this last...
Do you think you were conscious of that?
I wasn't conscious of it.
That's how I feel about
Yeah,
it. Whenever I was there too.
We kind of laid the system out as how we explain it is, you generally find entrepreneurs, because you're so strong-minded. It doesn't surprise me at all that you went cold turkey. An entrepreneur usually has this mindset, like if you put your mind on something, you're going to get it done.
100%.
But the one place that I feel that we lose is we so over-focus on one thing.
Yep.
Because the reason you start all these things is money is a tool to bring you things, but what you're really looking for is love and happiness.
That's right.
And then when you forget the family that you have, your wife, your kids, and you start overly focusing on this business that you're doing, and you don't balance it out, then as you say, you wind up 10, 20 years down the road, and your wife hates you, your kids hate you don't see anybody you love, you're not doing the things you like.
Guilty.
Your business is doing really well, you're making money, but you're not happy, and there's no balance.
No, and you're not fulfilled. It doesn't matter.
That's right.
You know, I had the brand new Vet, the brand new Maserati. vacations whenever we wanted for a long time. I'm talking about a long time. And then I lost it all. I lost every single bit of it to the point where I was driving Uber. Just to keep my mind going because I was going nuts. But I always knew, I could rebuild.
Yes.
But now it's something different. It's rebuild with a purpose. And that's why when my wife, I said, let's do this. And we did it together. And now, this is her business, but I've brought her through it and we've worked together and it hasn't always been easy. Yeah. But I've learned more about my relationship and about people and being in the retail space right now. And maybe it's not the most glamorous of things that I've ever done, but again, it brings you a little bit more peace. And then you can start pointing that arrow at what things really matter. What direction should you be going in? And then you could say, well, are the steps that I'm taking today or plan to take moving me in that direction?
I'll share, and this podcast is about you, but my background with being military, and so I was an athlete, military, government space for a while, corporate world. My whole quest was about providing a life for my family that I didn't have. And like Jay just said, I woke up one day to my reality going, I hate what I see in the mirror. I was I was a former athlete, you see me today, but I was not significantly, but I was 50 pounds overweight. I'm a big guy, so I hide it well. I didn't like what I saw in the mirror. I became this polished corporate guy that I couldn't stand. And I literally remember looking in the mirror at myself going who the fuck is this guy? This is not you. I lost my edge. I lost the confidence, the charisma that I had. And in the corporate world, I had to be clean shaved, and I just was complying and following the rules and the standards. And I was just this was never me, ever. And I did this for a paycheck, and I did it for my family. And and then I realized they didn't want anything to do with me. They didn't want to be around me. They didn't like me. They didn't I was mean and angry. And I was this shit's got to change. This isn't what I signed up for, And then it made me really, and I've done a lot of deep work and diving into myself, but there's anybody that's listening, and maybe this was your experience, but I started leaning into the behaviors that I was doing and wondering why I would do that. And that led me down a path of awakening, and really trying to find a better version of myself. And I'm still in this process and journey. I feel I love myself way more than I ever have. But I think people, and I know a lot of guys that are middle-aged that are just in pursuit of things. And why I asked that question about were you conscious of it is because I think so many people out there, they know something's off but can't put their finger on it. They don't know what it is.
And then generally what they do is they push harder on the thing that's actually causing the problem, which is your business, and just overly focus. But
so if you think about decisions, right? So decisions, any change. So you have to have desire, emotion, and knowledge. So the more that you know about yourself, the more that you can make different decisions and understanding these belief systems. So we have a wise mind and we have a rational mind. And that's where the wise warrior comes into play. If we act too much with our emotional mind, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to react instead of respond. And we're going to react in the way that our subconscious has been trained to react. So something that makes us angry is going to, if we act with that. But if we can create space between that and use our wise mind. Now, with our rational mind, we think too rationally. Somebody cuts us off in traffic and we get angry. Maybe we're going to chase them down and flip them off and, retaliate. Or, our rational, I'm going to call 911, but somewhere in the middle is that wise mind. And learning where that is and how actions and behaviors, because it's a constant battle of control. We try to control our thoughts and our behaviors with actions, and we try and control our emotions. So we get angry, we do an action. We create a thought, and they're all working intertwined with each other. And then there's this deep-seated belief system that we've ingrained in our subconscious that holds on to certain perspectives.
That's a good point. And if we go back to, I always find it interesting when people, as you said, take one addiction and switch it for another. Now, again, getting off drugs and alcohol and switching that out for jiu-jitsu sounds great, right? And it is in the bigger scheme of things. If you have the smallest vices you can switch, I'd say that's probably the best thing you can do. However, there is diminishing results as you go forward because you're not balancing out. So you had a second awakening.
Yeah. So and that's where it comes from. Seeing that emotion that caused alcohol.
Yeah.
It's just being substituted. It's never been processed.
Not solving the actual problem.
Not solving the actual problem. That maybe I feel unworthy.
Yes.
Or I feel guilty for shortcuts that I may have taken in my past.
Okay.
All of these different subconscious things
There you go.
have not been dealt with.
Yeah.
So that's where, certain things, are going to be obvious, like somebody that's alcoholic and getting arrested and, having violent behavior. But if you're in the gym and you look great and you're getting accolades, people
Yes.
are clapping, you're doing better at jiu-jitsu, you're belting up, you're 8 hours on the mat when everybody's 1 hour. But you've not, and then something happens like you get injured. Like what has happened to me.
Yeah.
I've had 8 or 9 surgeries over these last 10 years, 3 in the last 2 years, and I have neck reconstruction coming, but I've had a hip replacement, lower back surgery, neck fusion.
Wow.
And, then now you can't do that thing.
Yeah.
So now you have to find another thing. And then whatever that thing, maybe it's building businesses.
Yeah. So what led you? Take us through your second awakening. So what led you into that?
So the misdiagnosis with the pancreatic cancer after I went to my doctor. So they were going to do a surgery called a Whipple. They removed part of your pancreas, and I was preparing for everything. I wasn't married at the time. I got engaged. I did my will. I was planning the surgery because if I died during surgery, did I want it before Christmas or after Christmas? I was making all these plans. And stepped down from my company that I was running, stepped down from everything I was doing on the federal level, and just prepared to fight this.
Yeah.
And then my doctor said, well, we want to get a second opinion. We're sending you to Moffitt.
Okay.
So I went to Moffitt, and Moffitt said, listen, your blood work doesn't look like that. This is what you have. We want to monitor it differently. So they did this ethnoscope where they put a camera down and they look at it and they monitor the growth of it. And then I trained every morning. Robbie was the only one, Robbie, one of your guests from the previous. Yeah. I would train with him at 6 a.m. in the morning. This was back in 2013. And I lost weight. I was getting ready for, what I was going to have to fight. And after 4 months, they said it wasn't cancer. So it was a fat deposit that was on my pancreas from my previous problems with, pancreatitis and liver disease. And I went to my doctor and I was pissed.
Crazy.
I was like, and he goes, why are you mad? You could walk out and get hit by a car and die tomorrow.
Yeah.
Go do whatever it is that you want to do. And that was my journey into the plant medicine space. So then I wound up getting out of telecom, and they were using marijuana to treat pancreatic cancer at the time. There was an underground network here in Florida. I was preparing to treat myself with cannabis.
Yeah.
Never used weed, like throughout high school. I frowned upon it when I owned the gym, so to me it was a huge change in belief system because I saw this as medicine. And so then I got out of telecom and I delved heavy into helping to legalize marijuana here in Florida. Started an organization in 2014 that's still in existence today that does events and educational events. Traveled around the state. We finally passed a law in 2016. And then I wound up using my skills that I had from telecom in helping cannabis companies in the space. And that's what I've been doing since 2013. Primarily is coaching the entrepreneurs through the process up until 5 years ago in the pandemic.
Okay.
So tomorrow is our 5-year anniversary of opening Chill Coffee.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, and how did you guys navigate the shutdowns and COVID, and how did that change what you were doing?
Well, we opened March 8th, and the shutdown was like March 15th. We just stayed open.
Okay.
We took a chance.
We just stayed open. We saw CBD. We got a little bit of flack because we didn't wear masks, and that was real taboo
Good on you.
back then. But and some people called us out. And Robbie would sit in my gym every day, and we didn't know what was going to happen with the gym business. And we're like, why don't we just do a second one? So then we wound up opening up the second one during the pandemic. But we just plowed through it, you know.
Nice.
And I felt very. It's weird. I feel comfortable sometimes when things are all really bad. Like
You're in your that's kind of in your space because now you can actually act on
I
it.
get so
I
like
get that.
I didn't have any fear during the pandemic. I didn't have fear of getting sick.
Would you say you thrive in chaos?
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
similar.
That's kind of I always find that's the entrepreneurial mark of excellence is thriving in chaos is the thing that's going to make you almost never be. You should be comfortable in the uncomfortable.
I'm horrible in idle time. I
Yeah.
thrive in chaos.
And you know what happens? Then we start seeking that. We start seeking that chaos because we're comfortable there. And we become uncomfortable when everything's going great. And that's what I've been learning over the past couple of years,
for sure.
how to balance.
Okay.
Is how to bring, because that is the challenge of any entrepreneur that's out there.
This balance. That's probably one of the biggest things that we try to allude to everyone. And me and Kevin are still teaching ourselves, I'm sure everyone is finding out that you have to balance mind, body, spirit. You have relationships, you have people who rely on you, who care about you, and you have to take care of all of them. And sometimes you have to take a step back to realize what you're doing. And I'm very interested in your DARE book, right? Drink ayahuasca, remember everything. How did that come about?
So I was going through a real hard time. I had a bad surgery.
Yeah.
That went bad. My mom was in the hospital. She was dying. And I had been sending a lot of veterans with PTSD because cannabis wasn't really effective with anxiety to these ayahuasca retreats. And a number of the veterans that I had sent over the years always came back, had a great experience. And there were a couple of guys that I had sent there that were going, and they knew about my surgery. They knew about my mom, and they knew what I was going through. I was back to a really bad time.
Yeah.
And they were like, you need to come with us. So I wound up driving over to Orlando, and I did my first ayahuasca retreat about 3 years ago. And then I wrote that journal book, drink ayahuasca, remember everything. But I wrote a book about my experience to share with my mom, because my mom was in the hospital. And after I went, that was a major awakening.
Okay.
So that changed everything for me again. I had fallen into a real point of despair and back to suicidal ideology and all that stuff. That it just crashed on me, and I went and spent my weekend there, and it changed everything. I wrote a book called I Am a King, and that was the book for me to explain to my mom and my family, because at the end of it I was like, how do I relay what just happened this weekend to anybody? And I was told to write it in a book. So I wrote that in a book, and then I wrote, after my mom passed away, I wrote the second book, Just a Prince, because I Am a King. I'm going to get teary.
No, that's good.
Yeah, because she was the queen.
Yes. And me and Kevin have spoken in depth about ayahuasca. We've spoken about ibogaine, all these different mechanisms to. You said it quite eloquently. It's to find that wise warrior between. Your subconscious, your unconscious, whichever you want to call it, your conscious mind. And tell us a bit about your experience. How, because there's a lot of vets out there, and there's not just vets, there's a lot of men out there, right, who are trying to figure out mechanisms of how they can actually find that space. And I'm very interested. I'm going to go to an ayahuasca ceremony. I'm very interested in going through the process. To me, it's a form of healing that I think is very spiritual. Tell us how that experience changed you, and what can people expect?
So you can lie to your therapist, you can lie to your wife, and you can lie to yourself. But when you get under the medicine, you can't lie anymore.
Okay.
So you're made aware of things. And things are shown to you in a different perspective. And for me, I've done over 20 ayahuasca ceremonies now. I've volunteered at a number of weekends with people, walking them through it. And I've learned a little bit different each time that I've gone through it. But the first time, it just changed everything for me.
Okay.
You know, I had ancestors that came and spoke to me during my experience. You know, I was actually writing a book called Loser, because I had done a series of businesses and investments that just didn't work out. And I felt like I was a loser. And when I went in, and then I changed the name to I Am a King, and I rewrote the whole thing. But yeah, I learned that, you know, we have the power inside, and we have the power of choice. And that is one of the real things. And that this world is much bigger than just us.
Yes.
The main thing that I learned was that, you know, we base all of our decisions on the knowledge and the beliefs that we have at the time. And sometimes they're not the best decisions, but we can't hold ourselves guilty for that. We have to forgive ourselves first.
Yes.
It's good.
And then after we're able to forgive ourselves for whatever it may be that we're holding on to. For me, it was, I set a fire in the woods when I was 3 years old, and that came back to me during my thing. And when the police came and my parents came, it was the first time I ever lied to my parents. And I said I didn't do it. And, you know, for some reason that had held with me for all these years. And I was able to forgive my 3-year-old self
Yes.
and say, you were scared. That's why you did it. You're not a bad person. You're not a liar.
Yeah.
You know,
The subconscious stuff is super real.
Yeah.
You know, like, and that's why I think so many people that haven't, like, we talk about this where you can, I'll tell a story. There's a guy that I follow on Instagram that's been big into, like, he's done ayahuasca and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, he went to an event, and they went to, like, they had an after party event, and there's a group of people on the bus, and they're all having a good time. And there's, like, I can't remember, it was like salsa music or something playing, but it was like a fun dance type music, and everybody's dancing and having a good time. And there's one dude sitting right behind them, like this, and not doing a thing. And it's like you can see who's addressed things and who hasn't, because that guy's super conscious of himself to where he's so worried about it. And I was that guy, and I say this because I know if I would have been in that environment previously, like, what are they looking at? Am I, like, do I look funky with dancing? Like, how do I look? How do I think? Because I haven't addressed shit that's underlying. And I've done a lot of work, and I still have a lot more to do, but, like, I've addressed a lot of stuff where I've became a lot less like, I don't know, just picking at myself maybe would be the way to put it. I've forgiven myself for so much.
Yeah, and you have to give yourself grace,
100%.
especially to learn something new. And that's what we're doing. We're always learning. And, you know, the people that I work with now, it's, you know, you could call it post-trauma growth. I like to call it post-transformational growth. You know, it's emotional intelligence building. So a lot of the things, the behaviors and the actions that we've developed and that have been developed into our subconscious are based on our survival at different points in our life. And we've developed, whether it's habits or methodologies of interpreting the way people say things, their tone of voice, all of these different things, and
their trigger responses.
Their trigger. Yeah. And you know, once you can start identifying those triggers, but you have to give yourself grace to be able to practice it in real time. You could be aware of it, and you could recognize that I'm changing it, and if it happens, somebody makes you blow your top in traffic, you can't fucking beat yourself up for it.
There's my friend, I have another friend, his name's Jason. He was a Navy SEAL. He's been through a lot. He did Ibogaine. But he recommended that I read a book called The Untethered Soul. Have you heard of this book?
No, I haven't.
So I have it in my office over there. I'll show you before you leave. But essentially, there's a couple of points I wanted to make where, like, you were just talking about that moment in time you're sitting in traffic, right? It's truly a moment in time. You can acknowledge it as a moment in time that's fleeting and it'll pass, or you can give it energy and create an event, right? And then the other piece of that book was it talked about, like, a lot of the subconscious mind, right? And how if you took, like the guy that's inside of me, if I took him out, put him in the chair next to us, we'd fucking hate him. Like, he's an asshole. He never shuts the fuck up, and he's negative as can be. He's the worst human being on the planet, and you would not like him. Okay, but be aware of him, and then acknowledge that he's constantly feeding you negative stuff, and then address it and control it and make them feed you positive stuff.
Those are the conversations that happen in your fifth dimension.
Right.
And, you know, sometimes we're not the observer. We're the talker or the listener in that conversation.
Yeah.
And there's no moderator. But you know, our subconscious, you know, it's trained. It's trained to, and then our body follows.
Yeah.
Our sympathetic nervous system, we release endorphins, dopamine, all of those things as responses. And if we're in fight or flight all the time, even though everything on the outside's going on okay, but those voices are going on.
Absolutely. Well, I did hypnosis therapy with Helene, and like some of the things that came from that of like where. Like even just, and I love my parents, like wonderful human beings, but you realize how much they actually embed in you, like with a subconscious aspect of it. And then going through that with Helene, it made me realize, dang, like there was way more there than I thought. All this time I thought it was my deployment stuff. It was causing me havoc, all these things that were causing me issues. And then I realized, yeah, that's a part of it. But if I go back and really analyze the childhood, and then we did work to actually address those things and forgive yourself and overcome these events.
And it's super interesting when we talk about this, especially for men. Men are we're logical by nature, but we're not intuitive by nature. So we kind of started, you know, and those two parts you spoke about it. You spoke about finding that middle balance, right? And we tend to always go towards the logic, and the logic will override. You know, if you spoke to me 10 years ago about tapping into your subconscious, tapping into the fifth dimension, esoteric knowledge, I'd go, are you fucking nuts? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. However,
fucking hippie, get away from me.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
But now we're starting to learn that everything the hippies were talking about was absolutely true. And as you go into it, what in your experience, right? You went into a hypnotic state that essentially took you to another realm.
Yeah.
The same thing happens when you do ayahuasca, and the same thing happens when you do mushrooms at the right dosages, DMT. They all do the same thing. You're actually entering.
I feel like you're giving me a sales pitch right now.
I'd love to I'm just going to throw in your coffee one morning, but you're entering a new realm. And my experience is, you know, I know that you delve into a lot of plant substances, you know, DMT, psilocybin. My experience with psilocybin is I found a new level of consciousness. You know, I always play with people like, I saw the aliens. Like, I'm not joking. I saw the alien. I don't know if they're aliens, but I saw them and I had a conversation. And until he went through hypnosis, if I told him this, you'd think I'm nuts. However, you experience the same thing in the hypnotic state.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of times the stronger we are, meaning the more we've buried our stuff, the more we've powered through and succeeded at all costs, the harder it is for us to let go of those barriers, to allow.
I call that pride.
And that's why, so for me, ayahuasca was what I needed to smack me in the face and say, listen, some people can do yoga. There's so many different modalities. We use boxing as a way for active meditation. I have a Neurovisor that I use where it's lights and sounds, but all of these different things to allow you to let that guard down.
Yeah.
And to allow you to be open to seeing things differently and changing a perspective of how you see it.
Yeah. One of my, and this is hopefully for veterans that are listening to this, that'll maybe have an aha moment. My journey after deployments, I came back. Like, I'll share a couple of stories. When I was we went to Miami for like a little weekend getaway. My wife and I were about to be married. Maybe, I don't remember if we were married. We got in an argument about something. I have no idea what. But notoriously for like a 10-year span of my life, like I would snap out of like nowhere. And I couldn't understand why. Like, I would feel this like energy go from my feet to my head, and it was just this like a roid rage type thing, and I couldn't understand it ever. It would be at the dogs, it would be my kids, my wife. You pick a reason, I would just lose. I never hurt anybody. I never laid my hands on anybody, but I would just feel this fit of rage that would come about me, and I could never understand. I was like, after the moments and they were very fleeting moments, like they would happen and then it would go away. And I would talk to other veterans who've experienced the same exact shit, and I was just like, what is this? So anyway, that story in Miami, like we had this fight, like I snapped, like it was a big ordeal. You know, we got past that, you know, and then along the way for many years, like I put my wife through a lot of hell with just my reactions, my anger, my rage stuff, right? And not it's been a little while ago now, but like another one that happened over a pull pump situation where I was just like, I kind of snapped and I was just like, what caused this? Why? Like this is like my 8-year-old daughter, well now 8, I don't remember how old she was at the time, and my wife were playfully joking with me, at least that's what they told me, and it caused me to just snap and lose my shit. I was under a lot of pressure, I was under a lot of stress. It's so like I just was tired of that. And I was just like, what is my problem? And of course going through hypnosis and like really just being vulnerable to it and saying like, I have a fucking problem. I spent thousands in talk therapy. I went in my time with Helene made a huge difference, huge difference. My friend Jason that did Ibogaine, and he was like legitimately talking to me about doing Ibogaine. I have a Marine Corps friend that's up in North Carolina that's like, hey bro, let's go do Ibogaine. I'm like scared of it, so that's why I haven't necessarily done it. But like, I just have really like leaned into like, what was causing this stuff? Why was I like that? And like learning more about my subconscious, but then also I got myself back in shape and I became, I realized like loving myself more, allowing myself to like forgive and like give myself grace to stuff. And then of course I'm big on faith too. So faith plays a role in this, but like, honestly, just being vulnerable and saying like, I'm tired of feeling like I'm like this Superman guy when I'm not. I'm anything but that.
It's acceptance.
Yeah.
So, once you become hyper aware of it and then accepting it.
I was just tired of it.
Yeah. So like I said earlier, for me, it was forgiving myself first.
Yeah.
And then
That's
after
huge,
that, it allowed me to forgive other people. Because, like I had said, my great-grandfather came to me in my ayahuasca retreat, and he had told me how hard it was when they came to America from Italy and how they had to do what they needed to do to survive. Yeah. So, these sort of things, and then you start seeing, you're like, oh, well, wow, these weren't bad people.
Yeah.
These things are generational curses, if you will. And a mentor of mine says, his name's Steve Weatherford, but he says the chains of our fathers will be the chains of our sons and daughters unless we break them. And it's something I'm going to have, I'm working on the artist, but like getting a tattoo down my left arm because it means so much to me and what I've been through and what I've experienced. And it's generational. Like my dad, for example, let's just use my grandparents and my grandfather and my dad, both coal miners. Well, as I've been through this journey and learning and understanding why I was the way that I was, and like my dad had anger and he passed it down to me, and I love my dad dearly. Like I wouldn't ever say a bad word on him, but we've had a lot of these open conversations about it. But through this process, he told me my grandfather ran over a guy in a coal mine car underneath in the mines, and that messed with him for a very long time. And I'm like, I can only imagine. So if you think about that generational trauma that passes down just from that alone.
Yeah. Right? It's embedded in us.
Right.
And there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, where it gets into our DNA and then we pass that on, or it's passed on to us. And, but once we realize that we have a choice. So when we forgive ourselves and forgive others,
that's right.
And then we realize that our actions and behaviors are because of emotions and thoughts, and we start looking under the hood.
Yeah,
there you go.
So how does it work? And then it becomes more like, for me, a game. So now I'm figuring it out, and I'm like, oh, that's why that happened. If you've ever been with your wife in the car and you're going out to dinner and you ask her where she wants to eat, and then she looks back at, I don't know, where do you want to eat? And you get pissed. Yeah. I mean, you just get so freaking pissed. And it's not because she asked you why you want to eat. It's because you think, I make all the decisions all the time.
Can you just make this one decision?
Yeah, it's not because of that actual comment. And then if you go, that's where that's coming from. Let's go to Council Oak.
They don't want to make.
But it could change. You have that choice of how to see it from another perspective.
How you deal with it.
Yeah. And once you enter into this other realm, so to speak, I use that as a practice space. So I've noticed that a lot of times how I would go through the ceremonies, or how I saw other people go through the ceremonies, whether it's internally or is how you go through life. Yeah. How you prepare for ceremony is how you go through life. So you can practice during, whether it's visualization or through meditation, you can practice the way that you want to respond. So that's how you start retraining your subconscious. And then when it happens in real time, you do it or you don't do it. If you don't do it, you don't beat yourself up for it, but you recognize that it happened. So now you just check, okay, next time this was what I would do. And then your body will start to respond in conjunction, because that anger, that rage, emotion lasts 90 seconds. Everything after that is our choice.
That's actually a good point. In what you do and what you've been through, you've also become, you've got the books, you've got the self-help, you have helped a lot of people, right? How do you approach someone who comes to you and has a conversation? Because, I mean, Chill Coffee is a hub for good energy. So you have a lot of people kind of drawn towards it. I was drawn into there, just the way it looks, what's in there. And if you have someone coming into you, whether it be a vet, whether it be a man trying to find purpose, dealing with those anger issues, dealing with not being able to tap into the reasons why, what type of conversation do you have with them? And where I'm getting at is we have a lot of people watching who are looking for those mechanisms. And you mentioned it just in the last 5 minutes, you've mentioned all the little mechanisms, but how would you approach someone who's got these problems?
So, a lot of people come in and that's a big reason I did write the books. And I have them in the stores so I can explain them. But, I do get a lot of people that come in and ask. We host a men's meetup every couple of weeks as well. But really just asking them what they're looking to get from. And most of the time, I'll just tell them a part of my story.
Yeah.
I had so many different things that are relatable.
Yeah.
And, just make them feel that and that's what we wanted to create at Chill Coffee, was a safe environment.
Yes.
So I was working with this doctor in Arizona, Dr. Sue Sicily, who was doing the marijuana studies for the government. And she was also doing MDMA and psilocybin and having a lot of success with that. But one of the things that I saw was when these veterans were using cannabis, it was just becoming another thing. And they were going home and maybe it was causing problems with their spouses. And they didn't have a place to go, or if they quit alcohol. So we really wanted to create a social or a place where people would feel safe to ask. So we've been doing that since the beginning with THC, with guiding people to go to ayahuasca retreats, educating them about CBD, Kratom. We do Kratom tea there. We educate.
We know about that one.
We'll tell you a funny story about Kratom tea.
Yeah, so I was addicted to opioids, so I was deathly afraid of Kratom. And, it wasn't until we fully researched it and we understood it much more. That there's all kinds of Kratom that's out there. It's not equal.
Yeah.
Just like coffee, just like cannabis. But we produce it from leaf, we brew it, a lot of brewing, and my wife has come up with recipes. But Kratom is a great alternative, especially for my pain, because cannabis wasn't doing it for me for chronic pain. It was making me not work as much. My tolerance was going up higher, and same thing. And the veterans that I was working with that trying to use cannabis, a lot of them saw it as a last hope. Oh wow, cannabis is legal now. This is what I'll try.
Right.
And
but
it
the
works better
psychedelics.
for one. Yeah, it works better for some than others.
And it's a mild psychoactive. And if it's used with the right, and again, some people can get to the spiritual space through yoga.
Yeah.
Kundalini. Some people can get to it through meditation.
Yeah.
Some people need a little bit of cannabis. Some people need a little bit of mushrooms. Some people need an ayahuasca retreat. Bufu, which is DMT, which I've done that a number of times as well, which that's a totally different experience.
What was your experience with DMT? Because I'm very interested in trying that. I'm all for trying the experiences that give you that ability to tap into that fifth dimension. What was your experience with DMT?
So I had, a lot of times they say you have a whiteout or a blackout.
Yeah.
I just merged completely into the spectrum.
Wow.
So a spectrum of colors came at me and I merged into it. I felt like I went on a journey for thousands of years with tons of downloads of stuff that I don't really understand or even know. But I did have a flashback a few weeks after it where the same experience went in slower motion.
Okay.
Which was really unique where, I was able to decipher some of it. And then that was my first experience, which was just like, it was amazing. And then when I came back, I felt like I was born for the first time. And like, I just remember coming into the world that it felt like. And then second time I did it with the intention of losing judgment on things.
Yeah.
Because, we grow up in a world of judgment. Everything's judged. Everything. and especially ourselves. We judge ourselves for things. So I went in there with that, and again, it was just amazing.
We'll talk more offline, because I've always been so interested in that mechanism, especially it's a kind of a 30 to 40 minute process, right?
They said mine was 20 minutes. I had a videotape too, but mine, where I didn't move much, but it's about 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay. Off topic, let me tell you about our Kratom experience at Chill Coffee.
Okay.
Right, so I've got a very good friend of mine, Rob, in Thailand, and he's been telling me for years about Kratom that they use there for tea. You use a certain amount, you go to the gym, it gives you a boost of energy.
Really quick, let me just say, I have never, before that point, I had never smoked weed or done any kind of drug that wasn't prescribed in my life.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
coffee. New trouble.
There we go, right? So what we did is, he's telling me about this. I see you guys advertise it. I was like, I'm going to try some Kratom. Now, inlet, I didn't ask the right questions, and we didn't know what the amounts were. So we went to the gym. We get back from the gym, like, let's go get some coffee and some Kratom, right? And I'm telling them about it because my buddy told me about it. He said to me, listen, you take this much and you will just be the most relaxed, and you'll lay down and you're good. Use this much and it gives you a boost of energy. I was like, this sounds amazing. Didn't do too much research. So we go to you guys and I ask for the tea, and they go, which one? Give me the big one. So first, there's three of us, right? So it's me, Kevin, and Lisa. We just had a great workout at the gym. So we're sitting down, and like the ogre bodybuilder I am, I decide to down this.
I joined him. I was like,
and he did the same thing. So did
drink
Lisa. So we drink this tea, and I sit there and I'm like, whoa. I get up to go to the restroom. I'm like, oh my God, I'm feeling weird. Sit down. I'm realizing the Kratom. His eyes are like this.
I had no idea. I stood up. We were leaving at that point. I stood up with Lisa and we walked to the front door, and I looked at her and I go, I feel a little like lightheaded. She's like, yeah, me too. At this point, it still hasn't registered that like it's a problem.
Yeah. So we get in the car, we get home, and we had a whole day planned at the house. My wife was like, we're going to go see this, we're going to get there, get home and go lay on the bed. And I'm laying, she's going to go. I'm like, I can't. I have to stay here. Yeah. As I get up, obviously because we've never used it before, we took way too much. So we had a little bit of a reflux, right? So I was like, if I lay down, I'm good. I'm laying down, I'm texting Kevin. I'm like, how are you feeling? He's like, I can't move, but I feel great.
Well, I drove home and I called my wife on the way home. I was telling her about tea and coffee. And I was like, yeah, we had a good time. I was like, but I feel weird right now. And she's like, what happened? I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, I don't know. I feel weird. I'll see you in a few minutes. So I get home. I walk in and I was just like, I sat down on the couch. I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I feel kind of weird. At this point, he texts me. And we start putting it together. My wife, who knows about it, she's like, what did you drink? And I was like, well, we had some kind of tea. It was like Kratom or whatever. And she's like, oh my God, you had that? So she immediately takes a video of me, sends it to our friend Teddy. She's like, oh my God, Teddy, check this shit out. Kevin and Jason drank a whole cup of fucking Kratom. And he's like, oh my God, you got a video of the whole thing. And I was just loopy most of the day. I felt good.
Felt good though. And he takes me, he's like, this is the most relaxed I have ever been.
Yeah, it was true.
But we have our staff trained less is more with Kratom. Yeah. And we try to make sure if somebody's never drank it before.
No, we were very confident.
Yeah,
they
of course.
Thought these guys know exactly what they're doing.
They probably gave you Witch's Brew, which that one's like 20 to 30% stronger than our regular brew.
Yeah, it was fun though. It was a good experience.
I've had more since then, so it was good.
Yeah.
But I was adamantly against Kratom in the early years, but my cannabis business, Jane's Brew, House of Jane, was involved in selling products to some of these Kratom bars, and I had diverticulitis and extreme pain, and I don't take pain pills. Somebody gave me some Kratom and I drank it and my pain went away.
Wow.
And we were going away on vacation and I got 2 growlers full, and we almost canceled our vacation because of my pain. It got us through the weekend, and then after that, that's how our business started. We started brewing Kratom and selling it at markets.
Wow.
So we're in Ybor in the market and teaching people about it, because there was a documentary called Leaf of Faith. Because everything I had heard before that was negative about it.
Yeah.
But once I learned really about it, the plant, how it's harvested, where it comes from.
I've kind of realized that the negativity around it is literally because they're so scared it's going to take people away from pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
As in your particular case. Mine... I've used it many times. Like, I'll stop by you guys, I'll have a shot of Kratom, I'll go have a workout.
Yeah.
I can say hands down, because the one thing I hate with pre-workouts that they make these days, they're so chemically processed. Right?
Yeah,
You don't
there's all
know
kinds
what
of
chemical
ingredients.
process they're using to create it. You want the best workout you've ever had, have a shot of Kratom, go to the gym. It is the best feeling you'll have.
All the guys that train at Gracie, they'll drink white before they train
It's
and red
amazing.
at night. So red's more sedative. It has the alkaloid 7-hydroxy, which is more for pain relief. Now a lot of these, we don't carry any of the concentrates. I don't have anything against the companies that are making what they are, but they're concentrating this and making it so strong.
Yeah.
And they sell it as an extract, just that alkaloid. So and then there's, other extracts that are like super strong. That's when you drink the tea, it's self-regulating. You're gonna get just like coffee, so caffeine, and that was the reason we opened a coffee shop, is because I was talking to people about cannabis all the time, and 7 billion people drink a psychoactive drug, caffeine, in their coffee, every day, and that was the genesis of us opening Chill Coffee, because we could help educate people about other plants, just because Kratom is related to coffee.
Well, we're very happy that it's for me very refreshing to go into a place where you have this open end, because I've always had this very deep struggle with the system. We had a podcast 2 days ago, or last week, and I was explaining to people the misconception, how people perceive things that are perceived to be good and then perceived to be bad, right? In this particular case, I was talking to them about anabolic steroids, and I was saying, we're talking about a natural hormone, right, that at a certain age of your life, you're probably going to have to take for longevity, or you're going to have to find ways to boost it. And it'll be demonized to the nth degree, while we're still promoting people taking drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, taking alcohol, eating certain foods that we know are out there are just absolutely horrible for you. And it's these people's misconceptions. And as you mentioned previously, when I researched Kratom after our experiences, all I found, if you Google it, all you find is the absolute lies. Everybody's saying this thing's the worst thing in the world, we should illegalize it. And when you go 5 or 6 pages down, you start really seeing how this has changed people's lives. Using a natural extract from a plant, which can take people away. I mean, you talk about difficilitis. That is one of the most painful conditions you can have. It is horrible.
Yeah.
And finding relief of that by something as simple as a plant extract.
Oh, the first time I drank it, I was up on a ladder trying to fix a fan in my house that was broken for 3 years, because I had no pain.
Yeah.
It was being studied by Johns Hopkins. They were studying that it helps to regulate blood pressure, hormones. There's a number of different alkaloids besides the ones that are present for, the pain relief part of it. So just like all other plants, that are out there. But Kratom has had companies trying to shut it down the same, but they're more after the THC, Delta 8, Delta companies.
I'm of the opinion that's their cover story, and not to go down this rabbit hole, but like, if you ask me, the guy that I know that recently took his own life, the pharmaceutical and medical world need customers, right? Because it's their business, and healthy people aren't good for business. I'll say it like that to keep us from getting flagged or anything, but like, my experience around it, like with people that I've known that have had some struggles, like, did they really need that prescription? Did they really need that to help them overcome? Is there other ways to go about it?
It's the whole holistic healthcare. So the AMA is responsible for that. If you look back in the 1800s, we had holistic programs in colleges, and we had medical programs, and the holistic were eliminated. The colleges weren't funded if they were teaching holistic care,
and they demonized them and made them like they were quacks or something. Like this
was the advent of petrochemicals, right? So the Rockefellers, the minute petrochemicals come, you turn it into pharmaceuticals, pay for all the universities, take out every mention of natural products, so that people don't see it as an option before. I remember as a little kid in the 80s, I remember my grandmother talking about healing properties of plants that you don't hear about today, because it's completely erased from everyone. And everyone thinks we're rediscovering it. But I mean, how long has Kratom been around?
Yeah.
thousands of years.
And there's other plants, you know, and again, they've hemp. Hemp was the first one. Why? Because it conflicted with nylon rope and the DuPont family. And we have archaic laws that were implemented to give corporate advantages.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And it's great that there's a place, as you say, is going to a place where you can ask these questions and you can find out more. Because generally most people, there's Kevin, right? So Kevin, we're going to try and convert him to the world of psychedelics. Yeah. Because in one large sense is, what he's been told it's going to do is not what it does. In the second sense is, you know, you can have experiences. Am I getting the right stuff? Do I know what it's going to do? Do I know the people? Do I trust the people? As you said, is, you know, there's people all of a sudden taking kratom and concentrating it. That's not the purpose of it. It should be brewed from a leaf. It should be done in the most natural form. I agree with that 100%. And, you know, I can see from his perspective how we can be reluctant to go, well, am I going to go down this road? Because, one, we've been brainwashed in one sense, but in the other sense, it's also just kind of the experience itself, right?
To be fair, the position that I hold when it comes to like just narcotics, let's say it like that, is drug addiction ran in my extended family, and I have firsthand, you know, thankfully one of them recovered. Unfortunately, one did pass and did not overcome his issues, but it was firsthand in my family where my mom would say, like, it takes one time to do this.
I wouldn't even take an aspirin for the longest time. Now I'll take a Tylenol, but I was so afraid.
I was just simply afraid of it based on knowing what my family members had experienced and been through and the struggles that they had to go through and overcome. And then just in that region of area where my extended family's from, and my parents grew up in the same place. It was, I mean, it's everywhere, right? Drugs, you know, just running rampant, and sales and all that stuff. So I just had always lived, you know, and I held a top secret clearance for a good while in my career. And so for me, like, it was just always this, like, I just didn't have a desire to ever try it. But I was also afraid of it. Now, fast forward, like, nowadays, I'm like, I'm more interested in healing, and I'm willing to try things that help me heal. But I don't like the feeling of being, like, just messed up or out of control. Yeah. So I think, like my buddy told me about his experience with Ibogaine. Like, to me, being in a more controlled environment, I'm okay with, where I know there's like healthcare professionals that would be like, no, I know I'm safe that way. Yeah. Versus my gummy experience, which was not a good experience. But
so like, at the ayahuasca, they have volunteers, they have a medic on staff, and they have those. But really addressing, you know, the root cause of where that is. I felt the same way. I didn't want to take anything. I also had a bad trip in like 2006 in Vegas. So I was deathly afraid of psychedelics. Deathly afraid. And in my first experience, I went into it terrified. Yeah. But then it's changed, and it was wild. You know, we just did an ayahuasca retreat, me and the same three guys. We did a private one in January, and I was laying there, I was like, I love this. I just absolutely love. Whereas I was deathly afraid the first time.
That's funny.
And I'm like, now, because you start to understand it a little bit, and you got to look at it as a tool, just like anything else. So you're using psychedelics as a tool. The real growth comes from the post-trauma work, or your post-transformational growth comes from the work that you do after the experience.
My friend Jason, him and I had a pretty extended phone call. Yeah, man, I love that guy to death. Like, just one of the best humans you'll ever know. But this story that he has, like, and the combat experiences he had, he went down to Mexico, went through the Ibogaine treatment, and then he's like, that hour after that, when the ceremony was finished, he's like, I literally sat on a balcony and just like sat with the ocean and the earth and God, and just like literally at one with peace for the first time in so long.
When I went into that other realm, you see how everything's connected. Everything, whether it's this chair, it's just different densities of water.
Yeah.
And, you know, you realize everything is connected, and there is no good without evil.
Right.
And those things all exist, so we can't just be blind
to one or the other.
Totally. We can be aware of. And, you know, again, the more we're aware, the more knowledge that we have, and then the ability to recognize beliefs that might be outdated.
Yeah.
You know,
I really like, I'm so like interested about the stuff you do with the veterans, because I like, and you know this, like there's so many guys that have fought these fights and like the bad guys of the world. Like you talk about the evil component of it, like the line between good versus evil is very thin.
Yeah. So, it is. This program, the Wise Warrior, it was developed in Israel. Danielle Salber, she's been doing it for 10 years for victims of extreme trauma. And Oleg, I actually went through the program myself as part of my integration after using ayahuasca. And it was really just being able to understand those things that, you want to change and understand how to change it, understanding your needs, understanding your personality, understanding your environment. We all have a social life, we have a personal life, and we have a work life.
Right.
Some of us even have an online life now.
Yeah.
So there's
All
multiple
separated.
different places that we're showing up, and we're showing a different version of ourselves.
That's very true.
And we have different reactions to triggers. We may get angry at our wife for something she may say, but not something we say right here.
Right.
That may trigger because based on those different things. But it's really just about understanding and knowing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to dive more into that. I was going to take a quick 10-minute break. I need to use the washroom, but I want to dive into exactly what you're going down is how do those mechanisms come in? Because you explained consciousness, right? What consciousness is, how we're all interconnected. We're all part of something really big.
Collective consciousness.
Right? We're all part of a collective and understand the collective. So, as soon as we have a break, I'd like to dive into that and how your thoughts. Okay, and we are back. So, I wanted to get your take on collective consciousness. It's something. You know who Thomas Campbell is?
No.
So Thomas Campbell is a physicist who has, in his mind, he's proven the theory of the collective consciousness, right? And the way he explains it is very similar to what you explained it. We're all interconnected. We're all water, and then the droplets disperse onto their own. He explains it as we are a simulation. The simulation is we're an avatar. The avatar has been run, if you imagine a game being played, and we're the avatar and we're playing the game. The avatar, while you're playing it, isn't aware that he's being played by another player until he returns back to consciousness. And it ties a lot into, again, in my own experiences, when you tap into the other realms, right? Whether you're doing hypnosis, meditation, when you tap into those realms, you're essentially getting a taste of getting back to consciousness. And then, we can talk about esoteric knowledge. There's a lot of evidence that shows that there's certain things in your life, when you do them, you just have the knowledge. You just know how to do it.
From the Akash records.
There we go. Exactly. Right. And I wanted to dive in. What is your take on collective consciousness? How do you perceive it through the experiences that you've had?
So I believe when we go into another realm, that there is a collective consciousness, but it runs in an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay. And the spectrum colors that I saw, those colors represent vibrational output from emotions.
Okay.
So everything is energy. Everything, your emotions are energy.
Yeah.
And emotions have different energetic vibes or levels. The lowest being, hate and guilt, and the highest being awareness and acceptance.
Yes.
So depending on those vibrationals, when you go into what I call the realm or a journey or into that psychedelic space, it's like turning the knob on a dial.
Yeah.
And your experience is going to, based on the vibe that you're bringing in, the vibe that you go to, whether it's through your thought patterns that you're in, and that is going to change your experience within that collective consciousness.
Okay.
And then while that's happening, and I have come in contact, I hate even saying some of this stuff.
No, I love this.
Like 10 years ago, I would have thought that this was all crazy nonsense. But I've gone in and I felt that I've communicated, with others, and I've actually had proof of that happening. I believe that the more comfortable you become in that space, you are able to create intentions before you go in there, and work in there.
Yes.
And then the collective consciousness exists everywhere. It's the energy that you're putting out and the vibe, and that's why they talk about the vibe.
Yes.
And the vibe through
and how we perceive it is frequency. So I feel that the collective consciousness has raised up. I think COVID had a big reason for some are calling the great awareness, and people are talking about timeline shifts. The one timeline shift that was mentioned was if Donald Trump got shot and died, which timeline would we be on, right? If he and the reason I'm mentioning this is if we've been talking about this for years, but if we mentioned this 5 years ago, people looked at us as if we're nuts. Now you're
looking at like frequencies and stuff too, like right? Like
yeah. So
frequency, or
so the higher
earth frequency
is what Tom was mentioning previously. Is hate is the lowest frequency, right? So there's you can take certain water, right, or liquids, and you scream negative things at this liquid, and you freeze it, and you look at the shape it freezes in. It's jagged, it's ugly. You take the same water, you do the same thing, and you speak affirmations. I love you. You do everything positive. The frequency changes. So what we say and how we exude frequency actually changes our environment. Your frequency of how you resonate is how you pull people in. Chill coffee is a very good example of this. I didn't know it existed, but I was drawn to it. And when you go in there, you find that all of a sudden you are drawn to more like-minded people who resonate at the same frequency. It's the same reason you and me became friends, same reason Tom's here today. Yeah. We had a guest who was scheduled for today, and by chance, at the same time, I see Tom, and I'm like, Tom, how's your day going? And he's like, I'm available today. Yeah. There's no coincidence here. Yeah, these things are happening for a reason.
Totally.
And I truly feel, and I'm so excited about what's happening in the world, because you're hearing Joe Rogan's talking about it, Elon Musk is talking about it. You have people at very high levels who are talking about changes in frequency, changes in timelines. You have very smart people who are talking about how we choose, create your own reality. Making those choices. You mentioned it earlier. You have 90 seconds of rage, and now you have a conscious choice. And I truly believe where we are right now in the world is the biggest thing that most people who are not choosing to be aware or awake, their problem is they have to have discernment. Discernment means they have to have accountability, and that means that accountability means it's on them. I think it was very easy 20 years ago to read a newspaper article and go, well, New York Times is telling us that's the bad guy, this is the good guy. And we had no other source of information. Now you have the discernment of not just one thing. So, we're living in a time where we have a platform like X who can give us good information, but we also have access to psychedelics, and we have access to higher realms of consciousness which allow us to make discernment, which you can call it gut, you can call it intuition, where that's your true feeling. And I think people are tying into it. Just listening to your story of how you got to this point, which is very similar to what Kevin's going through, very similar things I'm going through. You've gone through a point of where you've learned to kind of tie in and listen to your intuition. You call it that warrior space in between, and that's where that intuition sits that tells you the right thing. And I think people are tapping into it more and more.
Yeah, and then recognizing, is it fear that's holding you back from moving on your intuition? Yep. Are you using your rational mind too much? Are you getting too emotional because you got hurt before? But your intuition is telling you the same thing. So we know all the answers are inside of us. It's just a matter of being able to figure out how to turn that dial. So to create, and it's all building emotional intelligence. So another thing I do with people is called the color code. And it's a personality test. And we used to use that with building startup teams because you didn't want people that were both red. Red is leader, controlling, working together. More red and white would work better together, which is peace people. And then yellow is fun, and blue is intimacy. So different personalities work better with other personalities, and we used to teach this to executive level teams and things like that. But I found that finding it out about yourself and then really being aware and accepting the weaknesses that you have, and maybe putting things into motion to improve on some of those. Or recognizing that, that does you well right now in your part of your life. So it's okay. we live in a toxic culture, and the toxic culture teaches us how to survive. And from that survival, we make decisions based on our beliefs.
Yes. And how would you explain your spiritual beliefs? So when we talk by mind, body, spirit, now just your story is you've got an extremely strong mindset, right? You've been through a hell of a lot and you've overcome a hell of a lot, but through those cycles you can see that your mindset's really strong. You've obviously gone through a hell of a lot with your body, right? With just the surgeries and all the traumas you've been through. So how do you tie spirituality into that? So what is your take on it? Because my personal belief is we all believe the same thing, but we believe it in slightly different ways.
Yeah. So up until my first ayahuasca experience, I really had no spirituality.
Okay.
None. I grew up Catholic, and went to Catholic school, but I really, I just didn't have any. And after that, I see that there's something much bigger, that there is, a creator.
Yeah.
And I believe God lives inside each and every one of us, as well as all of our answers that we can have, and that when it's over here, we do go somewhere else.
Yeah.
That there is much more, and there may be these other timelines that are going on, or these other, and I think we get a glimpse into it somehow when DMT is released into our body.
Yes.
And DMT is a naturally occurring. They say sometimes spiritual people that talk of these things have more naturally occurring DMT in their body, like testosterone. But I believe that we catch a glimpse into that, and once we become aware of those other areas, it's hard to deny.
Yeah, and I think it's becoming more and more difficult to deny as we're having this awakening. You mentioned earlier downloads. Now it's funny you use that word because Helene, she works in the NLP and hypnosis space, and she's very much into tapping into spirituality. She has these downloads where she, whichever how she's getting it, but she would sit and go, "I'm getting something," right? And you mentioned that. Tell us about how that experience happened for you.
It's hard to pinpoint anyone in specific, but I feel that once I get into a point where my mind is at complete rest, that things just start coming clear.
Okay.
Whether they're past experiences that I have been through or other scenarios, and they're not answers, but they're more questions that come up into, do we live on a flat earth?
Yes.
Or all of these different things that come in. But I feel that, the more information that you have, then your mind processes it and looks for the outcome based on what you're looking for.
Yes.
A lot of the times.
And it's always interesting, as you mentioned flat earth, I always have this interesting conversation with people like, okay, if the earth was flat, what difference would it make in your life? Well, technically it would make no difference. So what does it really matter? In the biggest scheme of things is your reality is what around you. And I always find it enlightening when you hear people talk about it, because again, you speak to people, they want to have arguments. They want to know, but it has to be around. But why? What does it matter? And as you speak into tapping into realms, I believe there is multiple timelines that are happening at the same time. And I think we actually split into them with our frequency, and I think DMT has a lot to do with it. If you're on a lower frequency, your timeline's going to look very negative. You change your frequency, your timeline's going to look very positive. And a lot of it is choice.
I look at it like a flowing river.
Yeah.
And each one of those colors are flowing, and it depends on where you jump in the river.
Yeah.
And if you jump in the river, for me, red is like the bad. And during one of my journeys, I was taken by a guide through the spiritual world, and I was shown the dark, the ugly, and then I was told, it's okay, you don't have to go in there, but it's part of our ecosystem.
Yes, it's all interconnected.
So it's all interconnected. So, again, just like we have the choice of the way, the choices that we make to help bring ourselves into the vibrations determine, and that's how we manifest our future and our reality of what it is. We're going to see what we're looking for.
Yes. That's a good way to put it. I'm gonna ask some off the wall questions. Is what's your take on aliens?
I believe, I don't know. if we should call them aliens. I think that there is a race that may be intertwined with our own race that has been in existence for thousands of years, and I think that
it's like the Matrix.
Yeah, so
like they're walking amongst us.
I believe that, and I've thought this since I was young.
Yeah.
I had a friend that was really big into it that thought Michael Jordan was an alien. You know,
Space Jam.
They're people that had these extrasensory or special powers and abilities but I think that there's something that goes way, way far back. I think we're learning a lot more about Nephilim and Gilgamesh.
Yes.
And
I'm loving where this conversation is going. So a lot of our history, from my perspective, is I think we've been lied to about a lot of our history, and there's a lot of evidence in this. And what he's talking about in Nephilim is a race of giants. Funny enough is we know a guy from South Africa who actually uncovered a lot of these things on Nephilim. And whenever you mention it, and I'm talking from a digital standpoint, you get shut down immediately.
Yeah.
Right. And there's no reason to, because if they don't exist and we're talking about something that's a fairy tale, why would you care if I say it or not?
Right.
And the Epic of Gilgamesh is a very interesting. Have you heard of the Emerald Tablets?
Yes.
Sumerian text going back to 250,000 years, which talks about a race of beings of how we came into existence, which cannot be denied. And in the same breath, what I'm getting to is that I think part of the awakening is understanding that everything you think could be true, you have to also accept that it may not be true, and you have to be open to the experience that there may be something that you completely cannot control that might come to you, and you go, okay, it's not what I thought it was. We're so used to boxing everything.
So I don't think we talked about it, but I do Santa. I do Santa at Christmas time, and one of my books is a Santa story, but it's really about another realm. Okay. And just like Santa, how we believe in Santa, yes. And then maybe we find out that Santa wasn't real, or maybe Santa is magic, and it's the magic that we hold in our heart.
Yes.
But it's the white feather story. But it's about, and I had this during one of my journeys. My mom was talking to me straight, and then as she faded away, white feathers were falling, and they didn't hit the ground, and I woke up. Do you guys know the white feather story?
No.
White feather story. So when Santa comes to visit on Christmas Eve night, kids sometimes want to stay up and catch him.
Yeah.
So the book is about this instance where these children stayed up and they caught Santa coming into the house. And so what do you think Santa will do? Folklore says that he'll throw black ash in your eyes or coal in your stocking, and you're going to get in trouble. So they're scared, and they go, Santa, please no, and he goes, go get some cookies and bring them in here. I'm going to tell you all of Santa's magic tricks. He brings them in, and he tells the kids about the different fairy dust and how the different fairy dust, everything that he does to make him magical. And the last thing is a white feather.
Okay.
And he says, and this white feather is from the stork of the North Pole. And when I drop it and it lands on the ground, you'll be back in your beds, never remembering anything that happened tonight, except you'll know in your heart that something was good. So kids go back to bed, and then in the morning when they come out, the presents are there, and there's a white feather. And in the book, when they went back into their room for the first time and they were dozing off to sleep, their grandmother that had just passed away the year before was in their room reading 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. And when they woke up, the feather was in the book because it never hit the ground. So they remember Grandma, but they forgot Santa.
Awesome. Yeah, that is awesome.
That's cool. A great story. Like, we're gonna put all the links to your books and everything that you do, because you've got a great story. I'd like to now tap into what advice would you give someone, right? So
hold your question for just a second. Hold the thought of it. What advice? I want to throw it in perspective. Like, so I grew up with extreme religion, like pretty hard thumping Bible folks, if you will. And a lot of this stuff, like, I've had a lot of conversation with my parents, and I smile and laugh a little bit because I've always been this one that's like, well, what if it's not real? What if it's not this? And what if it's not that? And I carry a small belief. I'm evolving a lot, but like, I believe in God. I have faith, but there's a big part of me that's like, what if this is truly our heaven, right? Like right now we're in heaven. Like this is actually our reality. And so I think it's interesting when we start talking about like how like you're getting these dimensions that are opening up and we're seeing things. There's so much more stuff that's becoming public knowledge and available to like the world if we just by exploring and learning more and more. And like there's a big part of me that has a belief that's like I think everybody's missing the boat on it. Like everybody's not quite like meaning like the religious sector. Like they all have their faith and beliefs that they're putting out there, and I think a lot of them are truly just missing the boat, and they're not.
But when you're so stuck in your belief system,
100%,
and that's why even with marijuana, it was hard to change the minds of a lot of voters because they were so stuck in their belief system that this was bad. Same thing with religious beliefs. Even if we are shown new information, you have to allow yourself to have a new belief based on new information that's revealed. So if they find these Sumerian, what if AI can decipher all those perfectly, which is possible. And then we see a whole nother story that came out, are we going to dig our heels in and still,
Well, I believe there'll be people that'll do that, but I'm hoping as we progress in society, and especially with the awakening happening, if we can all just look at it from a perspective of saying, we're all right, we're all wrong at the same time. It's all good, and it's all just take the best parts of it, but be open to that experience. As you said, I think we're on the precipice of seeing. We're already experiencing by retapping into all these plant products, right? That have been with us for thousands of years. Now we're re-experiencing it. We think we're opening these new lights, which our ancestors of thousands of years ago, this was their norm. And we want to paint our ancestors as these absolute savages 10,000 years ago, but what if they weren't?
But didn't like Native Americans have or the Indians, if you will, have like type of ayahuasca type ceremonies?
So all indigenous tribes, and I sat with the Yawanela tribe. They came up from Brazil, and I've sat with them twice, and they tell their stories of how this medicine has been passed down, and it's a way of life for them, a way of life that's much different. And the same thing with the Native American Indians. They have peyote. There's a lot of other psychedelic plants, and they were all used in ceremonious rituals. And some believe that even back in the day of Christ, that the blood of Christ was ayahuasca. They found harmaline in some of the tombs and even in the mummies, which is
the burning bush is also
that these are psychedelics, and that these were part of
a psychedelic.
And then on Sunday they would take the sacrament, which would be a psychedelic, and then through vibrations
they would touch God
and light.
Yes.
So the different stained glass lights.
If you think about like how Moses would climb the mountain to talk to God, there's a lot of these stories. Like if you really think about this, you go like these visions and the conversations that they had. Like, was it that psychedelic experience of something that
there's a lot of evidence in Israel that's pointing towards it. But I mean,
it's interesting.
You mentioned the Brazil tribes, right? And they've recently discovered through laser radar technology that the entire Amazon rainforest is man-made. Right, they cannot tell you exactly why, but there used to be a civilization, because once they put the radar, they could actually see the buildings. And they created a type of soil, a super soil, that they cannot figure out how they created, that has caused the growth of the Amazon forest.
Wow.
Which means that there's a very good chance that we had an ancient, advanced civilization in the South American rainforest, of which I believe there's been many, that was so advanced. But now the question is, how did they fall? And, our thought process is, as we're progressing, there's Graham Hancock, who's a journalist who's investigating these ancient civilizations. And he's finding evidence that mainstream archaeology they won't look at, because it goes against, as you said, that ingrained belief system. And they refuse to look at it. But he's showing so much evidence that shows that our history as we know it doesn't exist in the format we feel it. There used to be ancient, highly advanced civilizations that fell and then have recreated and bumped up. And we're just one of those in a long line of these civilizations. We like to think that we're the most advanced version of human beings. Says who? Archaeologists?
And you can't blame them for being stuck in their way of thought, because it's a sign of low emotional intelligence, the inability to grieve.
Yes.
So if they could go through the grieving process of realizing that what they were told was wrong, and that the decisions they made in their life based on that knowledge were not intentional or wrong, then they can accept. But until they get to that form of accepting that, they can't get through the grief.
Yes.
So it all comes back to emotional
because it's a loss, right? Because in the bigger scheme of things, they're losing something that was fundamental to them as an individual.
You know, we all walk around like, you know, I am a coffee shop owner, or I am a jiu-jitsu guy, or I am a businessman, or I am this, and you know, we identify and we create this identity that we carry around, and for a lot of us, it's more important to hold on to that identity than to be truthful.
I think that's wreaked a lot of havoc on athletes and veterans, to be honest with you, and I'm sure entrepreneurs too, but like athletes especially. Like I remember, and I know you, athletic background too, like you let your sport is behind you and you're just like, everything I ever thought, like as an athlete, you can't think about failing at your sport. You have to be like, I'm going to be successful no matter what, otherwise I'm going to fail. So when you do actually fail, you're just like, well, what now? Like, what do I do? I don't know how to process it. That was my identity.
And a lot of athletes that I've worked with PTSD and very similar to veterans, but with the athletes, like their life is upside down. They make all their money early when they're young, and then they don't know what to do later on. But most of them, it's the loss of camaraderie. So the loss of the team, people that they trained with, just like being in the military.
Because that's a tribe, right?
Yeah, you lose because everybody goes back and they're dispersed, or your career's over and you're out of the league, or you trained since you were 8 years old to play in any type of sport, and now you're grieving a loss, and you don't want to accept that loss.
But a lot of people, I don't think, actually grieve. I know I did. I just got mad and said, "Fuck it, I'm closing the door. I'm not going to ever think about it again."
Because anger is the first thing you're going to go to, because we're all looking for our tribe, right? And we switch from our tribes, and we do it on a daily basis. It's the reason that gangs are so successful in really rundown areas. It's the reason that men's groups do really well, women's groups. It's the reason that we had woke culture for the last 10 years. It's because they created an identity, and once they lock you in, it's a cult mentality. Once you get locked in, every human being has what they call the God gene. The God gene is our exponential way of wanting to be part of a community and have something higher to look towards.
Yeah, look at everybody that joins jiu-jitsu for the first time. All of a sudden, they're wearing their RVCA shirts and their hats, and it becomes part of your identity. And they carry it with them. Or a boxer, you know, they're always a fighter.
Yes.
And that's the thing with fighters. And whether you're a fighter in the ring or you're a fighter in this thing we call life, you're a fighter.
Yeah.
A lot of times you walk around and everything doesn't have to be a fight. And that's the other big thing, is to be able to identify where I don't need to be in fight right now. For me, it was running away. I had an awakening during a ceremony where they came in and they were serving me hape, and the guy looked me in the eyes and he goes, "Don't run away." And all of a sudden I was like, fuck, I run from everything. When things get really hard, you know, and I had been doing it the whole ceremony. Like, it was getting too much. I went into the quiet room and I was putting a pillow over my head and I was trying to escape it and I was trying to get away, and I was like, please stop. And then after that moment, I never ran away again. And I carried that over into even having arguments with my wife. Like, if we would get into an argument, instead of arguing, I'd jump in the car and drive up to my store, maybe, you know, whatever. And I was like, don't run away. There's no reason to run away. And I started, and it wasn't easy at first. I did it a couple times, but now it's become easier if I'm uncomfortable about something.
Did you reflect on that? Do you think that's from an underlying subconscious trauma that's there?
Yeah. So from when I was younger, you know, just wanting to run away and get away from everything, or hiding from, you know, repercussions or any of those things.
I know one that I identified was I was like overly sensitive towards criticism, and then I was overly critical. So like as an athlete, like and my therapist helped me with this one, and then of course the session with Helene and some of the other stuff, but like I grew up in a very high pressure situation with like sports, with religion, I went to a private school as well. So you had all these rules and standards constantly on you. And then, of course, with sports, the higher level you played, the more difficult it got. And so you would just get like, I got overly sensitive to being told I'm not good enough, because if I was told I was good enough for so long, But then I also became overly critical because I was so used to that environment that I was constantly, and it was about me trying to help you be better.
Yeah.
Right. It was kind of like, and I did it to my wife, and I would just be like, why did you do that? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? And being just critical in nature. And I had to really become aware of that.
And we live in a world of judgment. You know, we're always judging everything. We're always criticizing everything. Yeah. And we're rewarded based on perfection or what's better than something else. Yeah. And, you know, I grew up the same thing. I played football at Piper High School. Michael Irvin went there his freshman year, went over to St. Thomas Aquinas. But our coaching was that very hard on you, very critical. Yeah. And you carry that over. And it works because it makes you successful sometimes. Oh, yeah. It makes you very successful.
Yeah, there's a necessity of that. I'm interested to see your take on it because as someone who's got a psychology degree and the degree was just your input, you've obviously through what you've done is you've touched into the psychology of the human spirit and how people operate. There's, you know, through our dealings is we found that a lot of trauma is ingrained in you from the ages of 1 to 7. You know, and a lot of it is traumas you don't even realize that have happened to you. And I think he's a professor from Montreal, and he spoke about a trauma he dealt with when he was 2 years old. He says he couldn't remember it. He actually had to go through a whole process of remembering. What happened was he was in Iran at the time, and his mother had to give him over to someone else. So in other words, she gave him. Now, the reason she did it was to protect him. But as a baby, he could not comprehend why this happened. And he only realized this trauma at the age of 55 when he actually went and started doing the work and realizing how that trauma made him feel like he's not good enough and he was just given away. And he had to deal with it, regardless of the logical fact that he understood that his mom did it to save his life. That now as an adult, he realized how he carried that trauma, and that trauma, all it did is it transferred from one to the next and became, but it's the same trauma just becoming in a different format. And this carried with him his whole life.
For me, it was that being a liar. So that I thought I lied to my mom about that fire, and then I always had to prove that I wasn't a liar. Yeah. And I felt like I always had to prove so, and that was one thing of many, but that is one of the very apparent ones.
That's one that carries with me as well.
And I guess I was 5.
Yeah.
I remember I was 5. Through the vision, I saw the whole thing happen again. Yes. The fire trucks come up. And I was playing with matches, and I lit, and it was a big forest fire. And I just remember my parents asking me, and then them asking me inside and I carried that forever. Yes. And you know, it from what I look on the past is if anybody questioned that I was lying, or I'd become very defensive.
Lose it,
even if it wasn't meant or whatever, it triggered.
Yeah.
And those were all triggers that really came from that one. And so many other. Dr. Gabor Mate is a really good source. And, you know, he talks about, you know, running out into traffic and your mom smacking you on the rear end. Now this person that loved you just hurt you.
Yeah. You don't know why. You try to figure out the mechanisms, and you don't. I think the best way I've heard it explained is you have the reaction as a 5-year-old not understanding the context of what happened to you, and then you become a 35-year-old or a 45-year-old and you act like the 5-year-old because the context doesn't really matter because you don't understand it, but you're just carrying it forward the same way.
Yeah.
So that's where, you know, you show up to different places, like I said before. You also have different ages and different generations that behavior needed to be a certain way at that point in life, but not now. Like maybe in our teens, you know, we needed to be a little rebellious and make some mistakes and learn from them. You know, but in our 50s, we don't need to be anymore.
Yeah. That's a good point, because I know, like I've had my moments of like, why did I grow up like this? Why me? Why did that happen? Right. And again, the deep work has made a lot bigger difference for me to help me overcome and understand so much more. But I think back to the time whenever I broke free of the religious world, that was 15 years old. And baseball was my outlet. Because I've even had my moments of like, and my wife has helped me say this too, but like, I've had my moments of like, why the fuck did I play baseball?
Yeah.
Why did I do that? What was the point? All it did was cause me fucking harm and damage, right? But then I think back, and my wife helped me identify. She goes, yeah, but baseball got you out of your reality.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's true, because I was a good baseball player. And so I was in this religious environment, and I approached my parents and I used baseball to say, I want out of this school that I'm in. I want out of this religious environment so that I can pursue baseball.
Yes.
And they saw it my way and allowed me to do that. And then I excelled in baseball, and I got my chance to go play Division I. I had pro looks, but it wasn't good enough. I got hurt, all that stuff. But it was that I was a rebellious kid. I had some ego and swag about me because of the sport that I played and all these things that you experienced. And so, like, now I look back on a lot of these things, and it's just like I told our guy that's joined us today. He's beating himself up because of the blood work he just saw and where he's at in his life, and he's upset with himself. And I'm like, bro, this is your mess, and it's your story.
Yeah,
your mess is your story, and it's good because you're going to help somebody else one day.
I started looking at that differently, but also instead of it happening to me or at me, it happened for me.
That's right.
Yeah.
The baseball happened for you.
Yeah.
And each experience, we can learn from reading a book or thinking that we want to do something, but unless it happens, and then even the bad things, because it's an ecosystem.
Yeah.
So it's an ecosystem, and it has seasons, and it has different, not just seasons, but, even generations. And everything has to adapt to overcome. That's why when we consume plants that are adaptogens, a lot of times I like to think of that we're adapting some of their ability to overcome stress.
Yeah.
Because they've survived. They're adaptogens. They've adapted over time. And we have to adapt.
Would you agree that veterans, and if you don't know on this, it's okay, but I have been told by a number of people, professionals and other friends, that veterans come back from deployments and military experiences with hormones completely and totally out of whack. Yeah. Do you think these psychedelics help balance that?
Any adaptogen, so psychedelics could be one piece of that, but there's when we're out of balance, sometimes it's because of our mind. So if we can bring our mind, so I used to always want to know, how does this Rick Simpson oil treat cancer, right? Which is the RSO, the cannabis oil. And a big part of it that I learned was that it gives your brain the ability to be in the rest and relaxed state instead of fight or flight at all times. And psychedelics help to bring you to that point, which then can rebalance, because when we're out of balance, that's when the hormones aren't being released at the right time, just like testosterone.
Yeah.
And it could be because we took too much testosterone when we were younger. It could be because of the foods that we eat. Could be a number of different things. We take testosterone supplements for it. But, everything has a way to balance.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we don't know. We're just experimenting.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's mentioning the people coming back. I'm so happy you went to the mind state, and you mentioned before things happen for us, not to us.
Yeah,
and it's a very we speak about it often. Is that mindset is stop blaming the environment for what's happening to you and start looking at this the opportunity to learn, grow, and adapt. Always move forward strongly. And mentioning specifically that is when you the mechanism that, as I understand it, and it was our experience staying in South Africa as well, is when you're in that mechanism, it's the same as if you're at the gun range, right? You can wear ear protection, but when that gun goes off, even if you train your body to go no reaction, it's still on a chemical level and on a psychological level still reacting to the gunshot.
It's anticipating.
Even if you don't, it's still anticipating, it's still ready, and it still creates a stress response in your body. Now, that stress hormone and those reliefs that you have when you're out and you're deployed, whether you're as calm as hell, whether you're one of those vets that are driving around, you're out in the field, you're driving around and your heart rate's sitting at 75, right? 65 to 75. You're calm as a cucumber. You've trained yourself to do that. Internally, your body is still releasing hormones, cortisol levels are spiking, everything's going out of whack. The minute that you get out of that environment, you will see everybody is calm and collective in the shit. The minute you step out of it, your body has exactly what you said. Now your body goes, now for the first time I can relax. And all of a sudden everything goes boom.
So I'll share a little on that so I was an intel guy, right? I wasn't a shooter. I supported the shooters, but I wasn't a shooter. And for the longest time, easily 10 to 15 years of my life post-deployments, I had guilt around saying that I had any kind of problems or issues, okay? Yeah. So my diagnosis with PTSD took years later. Well, anyway, one of the things that really exposed me, and it was another like veteran video that I watched that the guy was talking about. He had been in tons of combat, tons of firefights, and he said the number one issue for him that he faced was the incoming rockets and mortars basically coming in. And he's like, because you could do all the right things, but what you couldn't control was if that mortar fell right on your head, you're done, right? So that was a holy crap interesting moment, right? So to your point of what you're saying, I remember I think this is my first deployment. We were in just like an open area. It was a pretty big parking lot basically, and we were like getting ready to move some equipment and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden we heard the rockets and mortars coming in. It was a pretty in-depth attack. And the guy that we were with had been in Kuwait in the 90s when they had the Scud attacks. And he had his camp that he was on received a direct hit of a Scud that didn't actually go off, but he still felt the concussion of that actual blast, right, and everything that missile brought in. My point of saying this is this dude was so hardened because of the Scud attacks that he had experienced. He was just like, whatever, it's a rocket and a mortar, and he just sat like when we had the attacks, he just sat there. Well, as on my first deployment, I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? I sat there with him. I just sat, but I didn't think about it, right? Yeah. Now, as the deployment progressed, we took them a little more serious because they were starting to get more dialed into us. And then we realized, like, okay, I valued my life. Not that these guys didn't, but I was just like, I'm gonna get down at least, because what I learned about.
Have you guys ever heard of the fruit fly study or the monkeys with the bananas? So with fruit flies, they electrified the fruit. So when the fruit fly would go on the fruit, it would get zapped. So it stopped going on to the fruit. Yeah. So now it changed their behavior from naturally going to the fruits. And not only for them, but you know how many generations down it took? 17 generations before it would go back. And then they had one with monkeys where they would electrify, and the monkey would go to grab it, and they would pull him down so he wouldn't go there. And then through their DNA, the new monkeys that were born would never even go for the bananas. Wow. So, that's depending on how sometimes impactful that event gets imprinted in you, it will change your entire
lineage. Your whole lineage is affected.
To kind of also share more about the incoming stuff, where for me, for many, many years, I would say up until probably the last couple of years, I finally been able to do a better job with getting startled, where I would get startled super easy, and it was almost a paranoia to a certain degree, where I couldn't stand if anybody would jolt or anything. And so now I've completely done a 180 around that, and done so much deep work that it's made a huge change. But I know I've talked to other veterans that have had the same experiences with that. It's just, if you think about it, you would hear them go off, you'd hear noises. I can't necessarily explain the sounds, but basically you reacted by always made a low profile to the ground, because my best chance of survival was, if a rocket or mortar hit us, it would blast back from where it came from on the mortars. So your best chance of survival was just get a low profile to the ground. Don't try to run to the bunkers. Yeah. Some people would run to bunkers or whatnot. And you also, you did kind of recognize you just got, I hate to say you got used to them, but you kind of did. And so I remember at night, a lot of times it would happen when we were sleeping, we get attacks. I'd keep my helmet and my vest underneath my bed. And if we had an attack, I'd roll under my bed, throw my vest over my chest, put my helmet on the back of my head, and go back to sleep. That's just what I did. Yeah. Most people would be like, what? But it's just what you did. You just got so used to just reacting in that way because they were so dialed in. There were some guys that got direct hits. One of my friends, he was my roommate. I was at work the night that this happened. He had shrapnel go right where his head would have been had he not got underneath the bed. Oh, wow. And he still has that shrapnel.
Yeah. But you could also add that into, not just reaction, but somebody that's always on guard. Yeah. So I have a good friend that was search and rescue, but he's always looking for threats. Yes. So you're going to see what you're looking for. So if you're always looking for threats,
you will find one.
And to that exact point, every night at midnight, whenever I would get off my shift, I walk by the Iraqi compound every single night with all the Iraqi soldiers running convoys in and out. at any given time, I was always concerned about could they scoop me up and take me, and nobody would ever know because I was walking by there at midnight. It was completely black and dark, so I was always on a swivel. It took me a long time to get away from that.
So when your mind goes back to those previous, the past, or even foretells into the future, we're not being in the moment. And when those things start happening, when we try to create a little bit of space with your grounding techniques. So when you start recognizing that sort of thing, I do something simple. Just look down at your feet and say, where am I?
Yeah.
You know, but if you can bring yourself to the here and now, and then you create that little bit of space in your subconscious that it doesn't go into that mode.
Yeah, that's good. It's like the trigger, right? Where like I can say, and I've not had to do it as much as of the past 6 months, I would say, but like one of the things I started to learn was like, you know, if something triggered me at home, that was the biggest place I was having trouble, right? And I would just kind of talk to myself, you know, and I don't remember some of my things that I would say, but like, I would just kind of talk to myself of like, hey, like, you know, or I honestly, transparently, I would say, God, like, I need you right now. Like, God, just give me some peace or whatever I would say. And just some kind of reaffirmation to help me just.
I have everybody create their own mantra. You know, for a lot of people, this will too pass. You know, but whatever create that mantra and use that during, if you're using the psychedelics or meditation, or even if you're going through a boxing session with Oleg, you know, using that mantra, and then it becomes easy to pull out. It's like having a toolkit, and you have these different little things, but you know, breathing, obviously, like warrior breaths, you could step away from a meeting and take a, you know, do some breathing, but any of the grounding techniques that pull you away from the past experience or the future,
would you say, like, with all the stuff that you've been through, all the things that you've experienced, like, do you feel like you feel and are living like true happiness?
I'm a work in progress. I am a work in progress. Yeah. To be quite honest, I mean, and I think that's what it's about, and just accepting that. You know, there is no pure happiness.
I like that.
So all these emotions, all they are is messengers to help us get through the here and now, moment by moment. So
I wasn't sure how you were going to answer that, but I did ask that for the sake of, like, I feel like that's where so many people get lost in this, is like, because even myself, I was like, I'm pursuing happiness, right? But well, what is happiness? Like it's a
happiness is the pursuit of purpose, the pursuit of the things of higher purpose, the being the better person. It's a daily thing. I'm very glad the way you answered that. It enlightened me, because a lot of times when you, especially when you see people who are out there to help, right? We're very honest. We're like, listen, there is nothing. The reason we call it the Laban's Lab is because we don't know. We're going to try and figure this out with you. We're on the journey with you.
Just a couple hard-working dudes.
Yeah, we're just going to try and figure this out. And the way you answered is how I would expect something. You are the person I would go to for advice, because you're telling me, I haven't figured it out. I've gone on a path and I've got a lot of answers, and I can help you through my experience, but I haven't figured this out. Where I
might be a little further ahead of you.
Yeah, you know, but I've been through this, where I feel a lot of people who offer help try and give this idea that they're perfect. You know, my life is perfect, and I've figured it all out, which I believe no one has and no one can.
I totally agree.
If you think you have all the answers, you're highly mistaken.
Yes.
Highly mistaken, because what you believe today may be totally different 5 years from now. And again, you know, all we're doing is walking each other home.
Yeah.
Good phrase a friend of mine, Brad, uses at ceremony all the time. You know, we're just walking each other home.
Yeah, and then let's talk about community, because you've created a community that can come together at Chill Coffee. You know, you've got men's groups there. Is how do you feel men have lost the sense of community? Because what I feel is, you know, we've gotten to a point where there used to be communities with men, as you say, as we'd fluctuate towards sports teams. You'd be in the military and you'd have certain aspects, but I think men today are finding it very difficult to create communities around each other, right? And also without having to say, well, I'm part of a jiu-jitsu club or I'm part of this club. Just being able to go to other men and have a like-minded conversation, putting your ego aside and putting any other feelings aside, just having a conversation with them and realizing that we're all going through the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's the culture out there. You know, we've become accustomed for so many decades to a world of alcohol and excess. And, you know, to be a man is to be able to go out and, you know, pack down 6 or 7 drinks at a bar and still get to work in the morning. You know, these and then these environments that you would go into, it changed, and the world is changing. The places to go are different. Even the regular gym, if you go into like Crunch Fitness or LA Fitness, people are TikTok videoing, they're doing their thing. It's different. So
it's not the same,
it has become more difficult, and that's why I think getting out there and doing events and having a place that's welcoming and safe to talk about stuff like this.
I think that's why we've had this. We're big guys. You see us like. The fact that we're willing to open up and peel back the onion on some of these very difficult topics is a way to just show look, we don't have it all figured out, but we're real and vulnerable about what we've been through. Dude, I'll be honest, there was a point in time for me where I was on paper I looked like I had all my shit together, and then when I really looked at myself, I was like, dude, you're a mess. Your house is put on a deck of cards. You're not doing this, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. And of course, for us, fitness is king. We think that our belief system is it starts with fitness. If you're a healthy body, it translates to a healthy mind. And a healthy mind translates to so many other places. And I think that the first step to that is being vulnerable with people and being able to just come in and be I don't have all the answers. And Robbie talked about it on his podcast, where that's what's cool about jiu-jitsu, where a guy that can walk in there with this big ego and pride is going to get pushed out really fast in a sense, because you can't be that way.
Jiu-jitsu was, and I ran a black belt for business operation for a while too, because jiu-jitsu, it basically humbled me and made me really quick, to understand that I didn't know anything, and I still don't, I'm a 10-year blue belt.
Just all trying to figure this out.
And I've gone through injuries after injuries, but it's you're always just learning new stuff.
Yeah, I would tell you that I feel like I'm a pretty capable guy, and they made me look like I was a ragdoll in there. I've never trained jiu-jitsu, but it was just amazing how well they just handled me.
And Robbie's got probably one of the best schools that I've ever seen. His teaching is unparalleled. That guy was an ADCC competitor, pro MMA fighter. Lived in his gym. If anybody is going to teach you jiu-jitsu, you want to go to him.
I find it, that's also something that's very important to me, is being able, when Robbie was in, we wanted to go in and say, listen, we don't do jiu-jitsu, and we're willing to put our ego aside and show how effective it is as a jiu-jitsu. In the same breath, if you brought those guys to come do our workouts, I would make them throw up. And it's the respect for each one, because I think they are giants at what they do, and you want to showcase that, and you don't want to put it out. And I think that's a very important thing for men also to do, is realize that experts in their field are experts for a reason. Don't shit on someone's talent. Don't shit on what they do. They are good for a reason.
Yeah, and you, just like a doctor, you can be the most amazing neurosurgeon there is, but he could suck at poker. But he thinks he's the best.
There you go. And, put that ego aside.
Because he's the best neurosurgeon. So because he's the best at that, he's got to be the best at everything. And that's why those are the guys that lose the most money at the tables. And
that's a man problem right there. Men tend to do that. We want to believe we're the best, we're the strongest, we're the fastest, until we find something that's not, and we kind of have to. I hate when people have to down someone else because they have something you don't, right? Instead of looking and going, you know what, they earned what they have, whether it be from genetics, whether it be from just the pure hard work they put in, and admire it for what it is and just be the best you can be.
I feel like that's a societal issue where we have kids that are wired to, in school, be the best student and make all the good grades. Then you put them in sports and you're wired to be the best, it's at the sport that you're playing, whether it's a team or an individual. So then as you progress and we leave sports behind, academics behind, what's next? I go be an employee for a company and I'm supposed to be the best and get promoted. And so it's this mindset gets ingrained in you that everything that I was going to do in my life, and I do agree it's more in men than women, that everything that I ever did in my life, I was going to be the absolute best at it. I wasn't always the best at it, but that was what my mindset was going into it. And I think that's a fundamental flaw culturally.
Yeah, well, it steers you in a way, but do you remember 21 years ago or so when everybody got a trophy?
Yeah.
And it went so far the other way.
Yeah.
So instead of finding an even
balance,
and sometimes that happens, you were too greedy, so now you become too generous.
Right.
So it's how do you find that
pendulum that's I feel we overcorrect and undercorrect and overcorrect, and I feel the pendulum's kind of almost in that point where we kind of come back a little bit quicker than what we went away. But
well, it's a roller coaster. We
really
love the excitement of going all the way up and all the way down.
But also, like I know, like in my journey with like fitness and just the amount of involvement that I've had in learning, and then with my wife, she's training for her first bodybuilding show, so I've really dove into that world and tried to understand and learn more about it. And then I met a guy recently that when he left sports, he went right into bodybuilding, and it kind of gave him his something, right? Yeah. When I left sports, I looked at bodybuilding like I was like, they're not athletes, and I talk shit about it because my ego and my pride got the best of me. And I was like today, and you can't live like this, but like today I go, why did I do that? Why didn't I lean into it back then? That could have been something really good for me. But
it goes back to judgment.
Yeah.
We judge the things that we fear.
That's a good point.
In our perspective, we judge the things that we're not good at. We judge the things that we're good at. We judge at how other people do things. We judge how we look, how we think people.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Think we look.
Everything's judgment.
Everything's judgment. So, one of the biggest things is how do we just start looking at our own emotions without judgment?
Yeah.
That's the first thing. So I got angry.
Well, you were going to ask a question earlier about what advice would you give? Yeah, I'm interested in that question.
You've given so many nuggets of, and I mean, we try and do this in everyone, try and give people those standpoints. And I find a lot of people take motivation from what you do, but turning motivation into discipline and action is a very difficult step. So you've written some really good books with great steps of how people do it. What advice would you give the man out there who's looking for purpose, trying to find abundance, confusing it with wealth, looking for that balance in life? Give him the fundamental steps he should take. What are the first steps that he should take to becoming that, at least on the path of that enlightenment of being a better person?
The first step is to learn more about yourself and write yourself a letter.
Okay.
Of what it is that you want and envision. And then I like Sam Sinek and finding your why. Yeah. Going through your passions, going through it. And then understanding the different environments that you have to survive in right now. And then by being able to, you just got to lay out the playing field and understand what it all is, and then create your reality from there. And then once you do that, it's just like any other goal, except now it's an intention because we're not attached to the outcome. And then through intention setting, we just start pointing our direction. Yes. And with the understanding that maybe when we get halfway there, that there's going to be a turn to the left.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Allowing that adaptation and the changes in, and just accepting what they are,
and being able to pivot. Nice. We used to teach entrepreneurs fail fast.
Yeah.
If you're going to fail, why drag it on?
Right.
Learn from it and move on. You're driving your car down the road and there's a pothole there and you hit it and you blow out your tire and you got to replace it, and then the next day you're on your phone and you hit the same pothole.
Yeah.
And you blow your tire out again, and then the next day you blow it out again, and then finally you're going to take some action and go, is there a different route I could go? Or you're gonna consciously move around that pothole. Then you're gonna consciously for the next day, and then consciously for the next day. And then eventually you're just automatically gonna go around that pothole.
That's good advice. So all your books are currently available on Amazon?
Everything's on Amazon, including the Santa's white feather.
You need to send me that link, because for anyone listening, first thing is, if you stay, even if you're just coming to Florida and you're within the Tampa Valrico area, look for Chill Coffee. It is an awesome place just to go sit down, shoot the shit, talk to people. There's always, honestly, every time I go there, I meet the most interesting people. There's awesome
they
people.
Say we should have a reality show.
Yeah, like, man, I met Matt the other day, who runs the Ayahuasca church, and he was so interesting. Like, just really good, interesting, good people.
Yeah, Matt and Gretchen, they were two of the people that I sent to Soul Quest, and then they became volunteers there, they became guardians, and they became facilitators, and now they have their own church, and they're helping people right here in Brooksville.
That's awesome.
There's a number of other groups that are out there, and and again, that was all from having what we call a botanical social. And then Rob, who's the guy that did my back surgery, we met at Chill Coffee. Like I never envisioned that all of my friends would be through this coffee shop.
That's amazing.
That's cool, though.
Right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put every single link to all your books, right? We're going to put that in the podcast so people know where to get them, know how to access, make sure they know how to get the information. We're all about self-help, and I think your books give people really good guidelines of what to do. And I think we're going to do another shoot where we're going to introduce Kevin to psychedelics through your...
Yeah, so, we were talking about it a little bit, and being... fearful of how psychedelics will affect you is very common. And so what I do with a lot of my clients is I have a thing called a Neurovisor, and it's a simulated psychedelic experience. So if you're willing, I'd like to try it out on you, and we'll see what you think. Because you've never done any other major psychedelics or anything. So that would be perfect, but without the body and with the understanding that it's something you can take off.
I can take it off if it gets too bad.
Exactly. It eliminates that fear response.
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll definitely do that, and we'd love to I want to get a lot of your details that I want to put on our website. If people are reaching out and they need help, specifically you've got so many good resources for guys out there, and there's a lot of men looking for that. A lot of people are looking for those resources. I want to put those out, and for anyone listening, is have a look at Tom. Your website's great. You've got a lot of information on there, a lot of help that can help anyone, and great nuggets of information here, and we thank you so much for it.
Wow, this is great.
Thanks,
this
Tom.
is great.
Amazing.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.